Hello. Um, this is a really surreal experience, but I hope lots of people are being able to log on and join. My name is Natasha Haque, and first of all, I'd just like to introduce myself. So I've worked in many different countries. Most recently, I'm based in Kenya, and my current job is as a teacher coach. What that role involves is bringing evidence-based practices into the classroom, and working with teachers and school leaders. But also in this role, I get to work on curriculum development. And it's the curriculum development aspect which I want to share and talk about today. So again, a little bit of context regarding my job. So I work for the Aga Khan Academies. There are multiple Aga Khan schools around the world, over 200 of them, but there are only 4 Aga Khan Academies. And they are based in Mombasa in Kenya, which opened in 2003, in Hyderabad in India, opened in 2011, Maputo, Mozambique, opened in 2013, and our youngest academy in Dhaka, Bangladesh, opened in 2022. And like many and hopefully all schools, the ethos is very much, or the central belief is that education is a creative and joyful process that engenders hope and curiosity. The Academy wants to develop its students in a whole holistic capacity, mind, spirit, and body. And they talk about developing homegrown leaders. So the majority of students who attend the Aga Khan Academies are from the local country, and there are some international students or some from countries around the academy. But additionally, there's a commitment to develop dozens of gifted teachers. So 80% of the teachers also come from the local context. And there's a talent identification program whereby some of the students are fee paying, but entry is needs blind. So many, up to 50% of students have some sort of financial support. And there are teacher professional development centres. So that gives you a little bit of an idea of the context from which I'm speaking to you. So what are the features of the actual curriculum? And I think this is important to sort of share, because it gives you an idea when I share the project on what aspects we focused on. So as a curriculum, we follow the International Baccalaureate, and the primary years program, middle years program, and the diploma program. So both the primary years and middle years program in the IB give schools and teachers a lot of freedom and how to design their units and areas of study. Additionally, in line with our mission and vision, there are 5 Aga Khan strands. That means when we develop our units, or we develop our curriculum, we want to be thinking about these 5 lenses: economics for development, governance and civil society, ethics, pluralism, which mirrors nicely the idea of international mindedness from the IB, and an understanding of cultures. And then the last core tenet is service learning is a core part of the curriculum, because the Aga Khan Academies come under this big umbrella organization called the Aga Khan Development Network, and they have their own principles of development. So any action should be community-centered, emphasizing dignity, self-reliance, trying to tackle the root causes of community issues, engaging in sustainable development, and understanding that a multi-input approach to community issues is important. And of course, reflection is a key aspect of the curriculum and service learning projects. So why and who should decide the curriculum and why? And I'm sure all the people joining have come from contexts where many different people contribute to the curriculum design. Should it be from the IB, which certainly happens in the diploma program, but also there's some suggestions for the middle years and So is it the curriculum that you're following? Governments, certainly in the humanities and in history and geography, governments are playing a role. In some of the contexts where we work, it is a national requirement to do the national curriculum. So, for example, in Bangladesh, it is important for all students to do the Bangladesh Studies curriculum. Is it the students who should decide? Is it the teachers? Is it the school? So this presentation is about bringing different voices into the curriculum. And His Highness the Aga Khan has offered us quite a big challenge in several of his speeches, but mostly in his Peterson lecture to the IB, when he asked questions like, what is the eventual place and purpose of the IB in developing societies and in the Muslim context? What can those worlds contribute to the IB community? And how can institutions which are rooted in cultural traditions, different cultural traditions, best work together in worlds that have often been widely separated? And basically it's this sort of, he poses a challenge of how do you remain distinctive and retain your distinctive identity, but yet take part in the global world, globalization and global coherence. So it's that tension. So the project I want to speak about is the Academies launched an exchange program whereby students in MYP4 were able to go and spend 11 weeks in another academy. So this exchange required some harmonization of the curriculum, and it created an opportunity for teachers to collaborate, bring their context and voice into the curriculum. And there was a desire as well, because at the end of MYP5, our students set the e-assessment to make sure we covered some of the IB suggested topics. So this opportunity brought in the possibility of bringing in student voice. And, you know, with teachers working in 4 different countries, different continents, and the planning for this started during COVID. So we couldn't physically bring teachers together, but did so virtually. And the whole beginning part of the process was building relationships, sharing experiences, reflecting on our different understandings of the mission and vision. It was an opportunity to connect playfully. We did many icebreakers. We imagined different scenarios. We tried to unpack what we thought was really important for the curriculum and why. And this led us to sort of explore some of the opportunities and dilemmas that exist in our different contexts. So just by way of illustration, in India, there's a lot of debate going on at the moment about rewriting history textbooks. So teachers had quite strong viewpoints, not always on the same page about that. In Mozambique, there had been, in May 22, primary school history books, which, among other assertions, asserted that the colonial period was a period of peace and stability for Africa, since Africans ceased being African and became European. And this really led to a lot of debate in Mozambique, and it got people talking, and eventually the books were withdrawn, but it led to whole heaps of discussion about who decides the curriculum, why do we have national curricular history in particular textbooks, especially in these young countries. But I just put in 2 photographs of my grandparents and in the UK and the map of the UK, because these issues of sort of decolonizing or trying to rethink the curriculum are not unique to the context in developing countries, but also in countries like Britain. My own education, never did we look at the colonial period or the contribution of people in the colonies during the wars, during the First and Second World War and things like that. So these questions are being asked in many, many, many countries. So what did this lead to? This led us to as I said, multiple activities, but possibly one of the most engaging after doing a lot of group work was thinking about what we actually want our humanities student to look like. And you can see as our guidance, we used the 5 Aga Khan strands because those are the lenses through which we wanted to develop our curriculum. And we started thinking about, are we encouraging young people to participate and advocate, show stewardship, leadership through exploration of governance and civil society? And we tried to answer a number of these quite challenging questions. Sorry. And this gave us a view of what we wanted students to be like. So that helped us with our teacher's perspective, but we very quickly realized that that was our point of view, and some of the activities that we had engaged in really helped us reveal our inner thinking, made us question our points of view, and we wanted to do something similar with students. So we engaged with students to try and understand our students better. And some of the activities that we undertook were to do with intergenerational exploration and providing our students with opportunities to do some intergenerational exploration. So the example that we have here, oops.
Okay, so I'm not gonna record this, but yeah. So I chose a picture of my great grandmother during the time of the.
I'm going to pause this. So the many explorations we did, we looked at migrational histories where students, had migrated from to be in their location on that day. We looked at where how different generations of the same family had been educated, what their educational experience was. And then possibly the most powerful, like for us as teachers, was sharing some artifacts that were most important in our own personal histories. And here I have a student who has shared her personal history about her grandparents. So again, you can tell this is a time just when school reopened, so people are wearing masks. Oops. Let's see if I can press play.
So this is my memory box. Okay, so I'm not gonna record this, but yeah. So I chose a picture of my great grandmother during the time of the Mau Mau when the Europeans came to Kenya. And my grandmother and my great grandmother and my great grandfather were missionaries and were helping for people's heart during the time of the Mau Mau. And she used to help the people who were affected. And because of that, the Europeans used to get mad, and they took my great grandfather and they put him in jail. And my grandmother was there to watch. So I guess my grandmother to our family and my grandmother's, I guess her history is based on what happened in the Mau Mau period, yeah? And I guess it means a lot to our family because during that time we went through a lot. My great grandfather was killed, my great grand uncle was killed by the Europeans, and I guess it holds a lot of value and sentimental, I guess, memories for my great grandmother and my father too. And yeah, it's the reason why I chose my grandmother. And also, it's not only history for our family, but also all of the people in school also went through the same thing. I also chose a photo of my grandmother during the time that Kenya got its independence. And I guess to her, until today, she always talks about how happy she is that Kenya was able to go through what it went through. And to her, she knows that it's God who got them out of it, and she's always happy to tell me the story. And that's the reason why I put my memory box based on the Mau Mau, because to her it means a lot, and also to her family, and also all the people use and Kenya who went through that. Memories are very good to remember. At the same time, it's something bad because when you're dwelling in it, like as you also say, PTSD is a thing. People can remember traumatic experiences, and at the same time, it can be something good because when you remember what happened in the past, you can help you build and also remember things they should not do in the future. But it's also good to remember what happened in the past, memories with your family, with your friends, good experiences and also bad.
So that gives an idea, and there was loads of powerful stories that were shared, and we realized at this point that some of these powerful histories needed to be in the curriculum that we designed. So after exploring the student voice and teacher voice through a number of different activities, we thought about including these student histories in the curriculum. And one of the biggest challenges we had was finding resources for some of the stories that students were sharing, such as, some of the things that had happened in their family histories. So that involved us sort of networking with experts and trying to get other voices to help us with finding resources. So at the back there, you can see a really busy document, which is our curriculum overview. So the units that we decided were to look at conservation and consumption of resources, urbanization. These were all issues that people felt were really important in the humanities curriculum. Looked at empires and superpowers, which ended up being one of the most popular units. Conflict resolution, global governance, human resources, and managing economies. These were sort of the topic sort of titles, but within that we did lots of different things. So the humanities teachers from within the academies looked for resources that they could use. We also got subject specialists to contribute, and interestingly we were able to get some alumni to work on our curriculum. And finally, the network, the Aga Khan Trust for Culture, designed some resources for us, and the museum in Toronto. And cannot emphasize enough the need for quality resources. So if you're looking for quality resources about the continent, some of the really good ones come from the Aga Khan Museum and Aga Khan Trust for Culture. So for example, there's a website about they did an exhibition about the Mali Kingdom and medieval kingdoms in the Sahara. So Mansa Musa, one of the most powerful medieval kingdoms and richest medieval kingdoms, and had a lot of rich history. There are great resources. You can do virtual visits. You can go and look at different places along the West African kingdoms. Those are really powerful resources. And there are others. We looked at the Silk Route, for example. Those things are resources that we were able to use. So approaches to teaching. Here's where we link to the aspects of approaches which were engaging and interactive. Got students doing role plays, actively reading, storytelling, doing simulations and problem solving. And this fits in both with the inquiry cycle that the IB promotes, but also, the pedagogy of play, where, students were engaged in activities which were meaningful, iterative, actively engaging, socially interactive, and joyful. How do we know this? Well, don't have to take my word for it. Do have some evidence. We revived some sort of old traditions. So, for example, the oral tradition of sharing stories is a very rich one in East Africa. And here we have someone who lived during the independence movement in Kenya, and was able to talk to students, share his experience, but also answer their questions, making connections with, other traditions, Rangoli, mandalas, mindfulness activities that have become more and more popular, using games. This is a game that was designed to show how ideas traverse the Silk Route, and I think some of the most powerful activities that were stimulated by the curriculum was the new unit on empires and superpowers. A lot of students were able to bring their personal histories into those units. Intergenerational explorations were really powerful. The unit on conservation and consumption led to some great debates and looking at things like the circular versus the linear economy. And I think ultimately the ultimate test of success, I guess, in some ways, is if students were stimulated enough to do something about some of the things that they're learning. And I share here a service learning project where students learned about coral reef restoration and planting coral reef tables. And then they applied for a grant and got one to work with local school children who go to school along the coast in Mombasa, and they designed activities to work together, and then students from the local school and the academy worked together to plant coral tables. The first year it was slow going. We worked with one other school, but the second year we've worked with 3 schools, and now 50 students have been involved. 3 coral tables have been planted, and at the academy there are 21 members of students who are leading or involved in this project. So I think that's a great marker of success, right? That students have been inspired enough to move into action. And that's not the only example. There's some older examples. In 2019, one of our students won an award because his personal project was to create reusable sanitary pads for women in Kenya. So this, of course, also got some grants and has continued. So the project has been sustainable. Some students, when they go and visit some of these local schools, have noticed some of the lack of resources. And so this student noticed that, students would really benefit from being able to, in science, have like microscopes. So she made one with pipes and, materials, reusable materials, or refashioned that, and was able to get a grant to do that and provide that for schools. We have a calisthenics gym student who put that into some schools. This is a coral reef gardening project that I shared. Another student from Madagascar created an app for where people could share different things, so they don't need to buy things. So if you have a lawnmower and you could share it with your neighbor, things like that. Here are the opportunities and dilemmas that we've come across through this project. One, not enough resources for some of the contexts that we work in. And that requires us, it's an opportunity because we can go out and create and find experts and look for them. But it's also a dilemma because in time crunched situations, it's hard to find those things. Students as primary researchers, that's really, it can be wonderful when students are engaged and go off and explore and follow their own path and research. But more often than not, I think there's also a risk of, it not being too loose. And so we've found that we've needed to help and guide students by setting clear objectives, helping them help to promote the higher order thinking by asking critical questions, thinking about actions that could be linked to what students have studied. And how do we capture some of this learning, right? It came across in a panel discussion on the first day that assessments don't quite capture some of these deeper, more nuanced undertakings. So one idea is portfolios. And our students also do produce or maintain portfolios with all of their different projects. So the service learning projects, this is for one student. And you can see all of their different service learning projects that they've been involved with and how it links to their learning. So those are some opportunities. So I do have a question for those listening in. What are some of the dilemmas that exist in your context around bringing voices into the curriculum, and which voices are missing? So I'd like to just give a couple minutes for some ideas to come in around that. As people are thinking about those dilemmas, I think ultimately this group of educators who I worked with came to the conclusion that we need to bring different voices into the curriculum to address some of the Western bias that exists in education, just simply by the fact that we use textbooks, we use resources, we do searches on often case studies where we find most information is context different from where we live. It promotes inclusivity, diversity, critical thinking, challenges some sort of systemic racism that does exist. It creates a more equitable and just education system. It's really helped our students and empowered them to know a bit more about their own histories and locate them in sort of the whole story of humanity, I guess. And finally, it benefits because it helps give people a sense of belonging, and it promotes this cross-cultural understanding. And so, as a summary, so far, I think how this can relate to other contexts and other schools is really when we give our students choice, we also should expose them to a diverse array of authors and perspectives, include the histories and contributions of marginalized groups where possible. I mean, it's amazing how many people we're able to connect with online. So there's an opportunity to connect and invite guest speakers and experts into the classroom, incorporating multimedia resources and encouraging student input and feedback. I think those are all the big lessons that we have learned. If you have any questions for me, we have a few minutes. Please go ahead and put them in the chat and I will try and respond. I think we have 5 more minutes, so any questions, any thoughts, any reactions would be greatly received. Hi. So we have 5 more minutes. Any sort of reactions or comments would be welcome and greatly received. So please do send in your thoughts or questions that you might have on this presentation. I've got a great one. What about changing the mindset of policy setters who don't want open and free thinking of teachers and students? I think, yeah, that is a real issue, especially in places where the governments or some entity is really trying to direct or tell you what to teach and is quite prescriptive. But I think that involves engagement as teachers coming together, as students coming together and making your voice heard through these projects. And I think what I found very powerful is the student-to-student engagements in between students from our school and students in local schools, and them coming together and discussing these issues. I think they're the ones who are going to be the change makers, and the policy makers might be caught on their back on the back foot. But yes, hopefully they too can be inspired to change some of the mindsets that they have and change the curricula. Other comments or thoughts? Okay. Well, thank you very much for listening in.